Carolyn Merrick, the program coordinator, and here with us today, we're very happy to have once again Olga Chuchkovic, who is a licensed tour guide in the Vatican City and Rome. And I'm not going to do a big introduction. Most of you know Olga, but she's a wonderful, good friend of mine. And we really appreciate her taking us to another part of the world and immersing us into an experience that right now probably we're not able to immerse ourselves into in the body. So thank you so much, Olga. And she's going to talk to us about a pilgrimage to Rome.
Well, good evening. Buonasera, everyone. Happy to see you again, and welcome to the new members who haven't attended the events with my little talks from Rome. And as Carolyn said, you're not maybe in a position to immerse yourself in your body in Rome, but this is going to be a trip for the soul, because we are talking about a pilgrimage to Rome. And the pilgrimage is common to so many religions. Muslim go to Hajj. There are many places where the Catholics also go. For example, Santiago de Compostela, one of the most famous ones in shrines in Europe, in Spain. There's Lourdes, there's Fatima, there's Guadalupe, there's so many places. But Rome is the capital, not just of the world, they say, Caput Mundi, traditionally, obviously, but of the Catholic Church. But it was the capital of the Christianity at the beginning, and the Christianity happened to be the glue between the local population that was, let's say, half pagan, half Christian around the 4th century. But at the end of the 4th century, Christianity becomes the official religion in the Roman Empire. And eventually, with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, with the barbarian invasions, the newcomers eventually convert to Christianity. And it's again the glue between the local people and the newcomers. And the church did not only offer the places for prayer, but also social assistance, helping the poor and taking care of the dead. In the Dark Ages, it was really impossible for an individual to organize things like funerals, or even feeding was a problem. So it kind of provides a structure, and it grows on the ruins of the ancient Roman Empire. And let's not forget, in the times of hardship, the church offered the possibility of a better life, well, afterlife, but still a better life. So let's start with the pilgrimage in Rome. What you see here on the thumbnail, this is the Pope Pius IX. He's a recent pope for the 2000 years of the history. We're talking about 1800s, but the church where he's kneeling under the main altar, there are usually the crypts with important relics. That is Santa Maria Maggiore, Saint Mary Major, one of the 4 papal basilicas. Those are the basilicas that are the most important. They were called patriarchal in the past, but that title was removed. Now it's the papal basilicas. And again, there are 4. They're all in Rome, and it's St. Peter's, then St. Mary Major, St. Paul outside the walls, and the Cathedral of Rome, St. John in Lateran. If you attended the event in the churches of Rome, I mentioned all of them, but I'm going to mention them in a different context here. Let me start with, let me see my little thing. Is it working? No, it's not, so I'll do it manually. Again, it's happening. Just a second. Okay.
Not advancing?
Not advancing. So let me see, what can we do about that?
Can you right click?
Eccolo. I think it's kind of just shy. It's a shy PowerPoint. Yeah, it works. Okay. So I wanted to show you the map of Rome. We are here in the late 1500s. And these maps were actually made for the pilgrims. They were traveling, already people were coming to the tombs of the saints in the very early period, like there was an altar on top of the tomb of Saint Peter already in the 2nd century. And although the Christians were persecuted until 313, people would still attempt these trips, and they would come to the tombs of the martyrs. They were all hoping for the salvation of their soul. And they were all leaving some kind of notes and drawings and maps, you know, how do you go, where do you go? There were still many, many ancient Roman ruins along the way. And what you see here is the map of the 7 churches of Rome. It says here at the bottom to the right, Le Sette Chiese, but it's known as the 7 basilicas. And those are the ones that are on the Pilgrims route. You can do many other churches, there are hundreds of them, but those are a must, those 7. And so if you look at the map, like here, can you see the laser? I'm pointing to San Pietro. This is still St. Peter's without the dome that was built after Michelangelo died. He died in 1564. And next to St. Peter's, it doesn't look at all the way it looks today with that beautiful St. Peter's Square, but it's obviously there. And here is the castle, Castel Sant'Angelo, and the bridge, which we're going to see during the presentation. And it shows then Santa Maria Maggiore, Saint Mary Major. That's where we saw the Pope praying, Pius IX. And then outside of the wall, there is San Lorenzo fuori le mura, outside of the walls. So Saint Lawrence outside of the city wall that was built in the 3rd century. It was the first presentation we did about the panoramic tour of Rome. And you can, I'm sure you have your registration recording, registrazione recording on your site. And then there is Santa Croce, Holy Cross of Jerusalem. We're going to go there as well. It's one of the 7 basilicas where there are the relics of the Holy Cross brought from Jerusalem by Saint Helen, mother of Emperor Constantine. And then Saint John in Lateran, the Cathedral of Rome, which is the seat of the bishop, who in case of Rome is the Pope. And then, you know, there's Saint Sebastian. We're going to go there too. Saint Sebastian is on the ancient Appian road that you have all heard about, you know, the movies and maybe the film. And then San Paolo, Saint Paul, also outside of the walls. Saint Peter and Saint Paul are the patron saints of Rome jointly. And they both die in Rome during the persecutions under Emperor Nero. So in the middle, you see here, well, in the middle of the city, there's the river of Tiber with the little island right here, Isola Tiberina. So it kind of makes sense. This church here to the right, there is no name, but it's Santa Maria in Trastevere. Trastevere means across the Tiber. Tevere is the name of the river, Tiber. And then across the river, Trastevere. We're going to go there too. And this is a map of Rome that you can see at the Vatican Museums in the gallery of the maps. And maybe it's clearer than that drawing. Here is again St. Peter's here with the dome. Already there is the obelisk, which was brought from Egypt. It's ancient Roman, but it was brought from Egypt. And it's the only obelisk outside of probably 30, who knows how many, there were during the times of ancient Roman Empire. And it's remained standing throughout the Middle Ages. All the other obelisks fell. And when they were found in the 1500s, whenever you build something in Rome, you find something. Because, you know, of the slides and earthquakes and vegetation and the layers of history that accumulate, there's so much under the soil. And the popes in the 1500s positioned 4 more obelisks as a sort of a GPS for the pilgrims. So what we're going to do as well, not just the entrance to St. Peter's, where a lot of the pilgrims would start from there, but they would also start, you see here, I'm pointing out with the laser, this is the northern gate, Piazza del Popolo. And here is the first obelisk that the pilgrims would see coming from the north. And again, calculated in the Middle Ages, which stretched between the 5th and the 15th century. The Mediterranean is mainly off limits there were the naval battles, there are the Islamic countries taking over, and it's not safe. There's no going to Jerusalem anymore. So Rome becomes the new Jerusalem. But now where are the people coming from? Mainly from the north, given the geographical position of Rome. So we'll go there. There are a few churches there with the paintings by Caravaggio, the famous Caravaggio. We may do something on Caravaggio, Caroline. I think we mentioned that. And so I'll show you those. And you see here, there's the Colosseum right here. And then the biggest obelisk here, this is the Cathedral of St. John in Lateran in its medieval shape. You know, it's still not rebuilt the way it looks today. So let's continue. Now, this is Via Francigena, via standing for the road, the street Francigena, or the French or Frankish, a street coming from France, or where the Franks used to live in the 8th, 9th century. That was the only decent kingdom in Europe. It was actually the Frankish king Charlemagne who signed a deal with the Pope, creating the holy, so-called Holy Roman Empire. And the Franks were future French and German, but they still didn't know that back then. And so you see here, a lot of the pilgrims would start from Canterbury, and then they would go through France and all that. And you see these little towns in Italy: Lucca, San Gimignano, Siena, Radicofani, Viterbo, Roma. These little towns were very developed because they provided social help, you know, dwellings and food for the pilgrims, and there was a little industry. And especially around the 12th, 13th, 14th century, there was a huge request for the relics. And imagine how many little pieces of the bones from the catacombs of just some little anonymous Christian who may have not died as a martyr, may have ended up sold as relics. But not even the Catholic Church insists so much on the authenticity of many of those relics. Rarely they pronounce and say, this is the authentic one. So because we know that something happened centuries ago, it's difficult to really prove that no DNA. And this is another lovely, lovely map of Rome, but I will not bother you so much with maps anymore. But just, you know, to give you an idea, you know, where we're going, what we're doing. Here is St. Peter's again. But you see how many porta. Porta is the gate. So people could have come from Porta San Pancrazio, Porta San Paolo, Porta Appia, Porta Tiburtina, Porta Pia, Porta Salaria, Porta Flaminia. So this is the entrance that we're going to take a look at. And again, in the Middle Ages, this is one of the 10 itineraries that were found in the monastery in Switzerland. And again, I'm just showing it to you as an example. So it's shown to the pilgrims where they would go. And again, there were 10 of these main itineraries, but always respecting at least St. Peter's and St. Paul outside the walls. They were like the most important. And of course, if you could do 7, but why would pilgrims do that? Well, in exchange for the absolution of their sins. But now, when we say the absolution of their sins, that usually is referred, not usually, it is referred to the so-called temporal punishment. Now, what is temporal punishment? Just think of it as a temporary punishment, which refers to the purgatory. Because if we do not repent for our sins, then we may end up in eternal punishment. But if we repent, we get either reduction or the total absolution from the purgatory. It's extremely difficult to be completely purified before actually getting there. But that is the point. People were searching for salvation. And the purgatory is where your soul would purge. Sometimes they would say, oh, well, thousands of years. But there was a big issue in the Catholic Church, selling of indulgences. Okay, well, if you pay, well, this much, I could reduce your favorite uncle's time in the purgatory for at least 2,000 years. How much are you willing to pay? So one of the reasons for the birth of Protestantism was the indulgences. There was a lot of money circulating there. Famously, Martin Luther came to Rome when St. Peter's was built at the beginning, the new St. Peter's, and the rest is history, plus a general corruption. But then there comes period of revival, the Counter-Reformation in the 1500s, and the church becomes completely opposite, extremely severe. And a lot of rules about the pilgrims and the penances and which prayers, which rituals, which good deeds, stations of the cross, a lot of that was written in stone during the so-called Council of Trent. Again, we're talking about the 1500s. Reaction to the Reformation was the Counter-Reformation in the Catholic Church. But let's go to Santo Spirito. Santo Spirito was a hospital and still is. This beautiful cloister goes back to the 1500s, and it's the part of the main offices of the hospital, which is still there, called the Holy Spirit. The Saxons were there from Northern Europe, people coming from different countries of Europe. They would have their own infrastructures in Rome, who would take care of them if they got sick, if they died. And these journeys would sometimes take months, and people were never sure they would get back home. So they would write down their will and before they left, and they were sometimes living for just that was the aim, the final aim and conclusion of their life frequently. Now, St. Peter's, we've been there if you've seen the presentation, so I'll be brief about St. Peter's, but I wanted to show you pilgrims who come to Rome these modern times. They all would like to be here on Sunday, 12 o'clock, because the Pope shows up here to the right. The second window in from the right is normally the papal residence. Pope Francesco doesn't live there. He lives inside the Vatican city state in a smaller apartment, but the Pope shows up every Sunday for the blessing at 12 o'clock. And then he talks to whoever is on the square, obviously go through some security around the square. And then he blesses everyone. And if people have rosaries or little religious articles with them, the blessing extends to those articles so they could take them back home to their friends and say this was blessed by the Pope. Although you may not have had, obviously, a private audience. And the obelisk is the one that has been standing for 2,000 years. And it was just repositioned slightly to fit into the center of the square in the late 1500s. It was in the center of ancient Roman Stadium where Peter died. And Peter was buried in the ancient Roman cemetery that was right outside of the stadium. And if you looked at the dome, then going straight down, under the floor of the basilica, there are the so-called scavi, excavations, and that is the ancient Roman cemetery where there's also a tomb of Peter. And if you go inside St. Peter's, there you go. They say the biggest church in the world. That's always kind of problematic. What's the biggest? What's the shortest? The tallest? Is it volume? Is it the width? Is it the height? But let's say one of the biggest churches in the world. But what brings the pilgrims to St. Peter is the tomb of St. Peter. Of course, there's also the tomb of John Paul II. There are other, I'll show you, there are some, the bodies of the popes even visible. But this is the main altar. And underneath in the crypt, you can see a chest. You can't go down, it's sort of blocked. But I know from the pictures and you kind of, but you can't really take a picture of that. There is a chest with the sashes that are given to the bishops and archbishops when they're nominated, and they're kept in the vicinity of the Peter's tomb that is down below in the excavations. Even if you do the excavations, they don't let you either touch or get really at the tomb. You kind of see it in between the columns where that thing there, well, that's the tomb of Peter. There were the excavations done in the 1950s, and they found this sarcophagus and the body of the man in his 60s, and there was the inscription, Peter is here. So by some elements, it seems to confirm the tradition that, yes, Peter is buried there. And there is a statue of St. Peter. Some say it's 5th century, some say it's 12th. Do we really care? It's old enough. But the pilgrims like to come, actually everybody likes to come and touch the foot of Peter, see how many thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of millions actually, have touched these bronze feet. It's for luck, you know, it's a little blessing. And I promise I'd show you there are, well, actually 3 cute little dead popes in St. Peter's. This is Innocent 11th. He died about 300 years ago. He's covered with silver. It's like a funerary mask, but actually he was first beatified in 1904. And then when you're beatified, then you could get the mask and be exposed. It's not really something that's done so frequently. There is one of the relatively recent popes who died in 1962, John the 23rd. And he became a saint as well. So he was a very popular pope. He was known as the Papa Buono, and he has wax on his face. And pilgrims who come into winter, now I'm talking about how it normally goes. I'm not going to mention this. You know, the COVID situation has kind of changed everything, but hopefully things will go to what they were. And in the winter months, then there are not that many pilgrims on the square. And there's this building from 1971. Carolyn, this is our neighborhood where you stayed with me. And Sala Nervi, 1971, can take about 7,000 pilgrims. It's inside the Vatican walls. And 4 papal basilicas have these holy doors that are sealed, plastered in between the Jubilee years. Now, the Jubilees are originally a Jewish tradition and celebrating every 50 years, actually 7 times 7, 49, a year when the soil at the farms is left fallow, when the debts are forgiven, when the trespasses are forgiven. It's the year of celebrating, rejoicing, the year of forgiveness. And when Jerusalem became off limits and Rome becomes the new Jerusalem, the Pope Bonifacius VIII indicted the first Jubilee in the history of the Catholic Church. At first, it was held it was meant to be every 100 years, but it proved to be a great occasion for the pilgrims to come to obtain the absolution of their sins. And it was then proclaimed every 50 years, and very soon, after about 150 years, every 25. And it's been like that ever since. And the tradition of the holy doors also goes back to the 1400s, and this is the one at St. Peter's. Inside, it looks like this. You see, it's plastered, and it's broken. The Pope comes with a little hammer, and he kind of breaks the plaster, and the door is open throughout the whole year. The pilgrims go through the holy door. There are also holy doors in other 3 papal basilicas. At the top of the door, you see the Saint Jacques, the seashell, the symbol of the pilgrims. It comes from actually the tradition from Santiago de Compostela, where St. James is buried, and pilgrims were fed a lot because that's the seashell that you could find in abundance there. And also, we have so many spoons in our drawers, but in the past, a spoon or like a mug, you know, it was luxury. So if people had their own spoon, it was like carved of wood. But the pilgrims would have these seashells that they would carry around their waist on the rope, and they would use it as, you know, for drinking and eating, and it became a symbol of the pilgrimage. Now there's Peter here too with his keys. You know, Peter got the keys from Jesus. He told him, "You will be my rock on which I will build my church," and the golden keys for the kingdom in heaven and the silver key for the kingdom on earth. And here is a seashell, beautiful seashell in marble. It's a very frequent decorated element in the Catholic Church. And the pilgrims who have been to Santiago de Compostela, they would have like a seashell of fabric, you know, like sewn on their robes to show that they were in Santiago de Compostela. So now that you have visited St. Peter's, remember you go towards the Castel Sant'Angelo, the Castle of the Angel, with the bridge that was originally built in the 2nd century, the same as the lower part of the castle is from the 2nd century, Emperor Hadrian. But the angel is Archangel Michael, and he's protecting the city, unsheathing his sword. According to the legend, he defended Rome from a plague as early as 6th century. This castle has amazing history, but we are concentrated on pilgrims, and they would go then past the castle of the angel along this bridge with these beautiful angels designed by Bernini, some even carved by Bernini. We'll talk also about Bernini one of these months. And each one of them is holding a symbol of the so-called Christ's Passion, which would be the cross, the sponge with the vial, the holy spear, and so on. And you walk along the bridge, looking back. This is how beautiful the castle, I mean, actually imposing the castle. Looks like you see the angel at the far end here is holding the cross, of course, the most recognizable symbol of Christ's Passion. And this one is holding the column of the flagellation. We're going to see it later. Actual, is it actual? Is it not? We'll leave that to someone else to decide. So on the bridge and all over Rome, you can see these little marks worn out on the streets. They're there since 2015. That was the year of the extraordinary jubilee that the popes can indict. Pope Francis, when he became a pope, he indicted the extraordinary jubilee of mercy and charity. So these were the indications for the pilgrims, which way to go for which site of interest. And some of them are still visible. But now, remember, we'll go to the northern gate, and we'll enter through the Porta Flaminia. Inside, there is an ancient Egyptian obelisk. That's the one that would have greeted the pilgrims coming from the north. As you entered Rome, you would see this 13th century BC obelisk and the 3 streets radiating from the northern gate. But if you looked behind you, there is a church of Santa Maria del Popolo, where you would say your first prayer. And inside are these masterpieces by Caravaggio. To the left is the crucifixion of Saint Peter. Then we have another artist, the Assumption of Mary, and then the conversion of Saint Paul. Very particular artist with his naturalism, realism, with dirty feet, old wrinkled faces, dark backdrop, huge revolution in the early 1600s, late 1500s, early 1600s. Just completely different from the politically correct, cute little angels with round eyes and kind of manga curly hair. And this is also Caravaggio, the Madonna of the Pilgrims, Our Lady of the Pilgrims. The model for this Our Lady was actually one of his, well, ladies of the night friends. Her name was Lena, and she appears in many of his paintings. And these 2 people praying to Our Lady, they are pilgrims, and their mother and the son, we know from the people who commissioned the altarpiece, who are praying to a mother and the son, with Caravaggio's ubiquitous dirty feet. Well, how else are you going to come to Rome after so many kilometers or miles? Now, in that same church, many ladies, expectant ladies, or who would like to remain pregnant, but especially pregnant ladies, they come to pray to this Madonna, which is actually a reworking of an ancient Roman statue. But you see how many have left these little gifts ex voto as a sign of thankfulness for the prayer fulfilled for a safe childbirth. Now, more of Caravaggio in the same neighborhood, just very briefly, a chapel dedicated to Saint Matthew, the evangelist, painted for the Jubilee, year 1600, extremely important at that time, was to prove the importance of the Catholic Church over the Protestantism. So what you see here, let me show you here to the right, this is Jesus coming out from a wall, there's no door, there's no entrance, he appears and he chooses Matthew. Now, who is Matthew here? They're still debating. Is it this gentleman here pointing to his chest, or is he actually pointing to this young man counting coins because Matthew was a tax collector. But that remains open. But this is a figure of Saint Peter that you cannot see on the in the first versions of the painting. He was added later as a message. You know, it's Peter who's buried in Rome. He's the first pope. Jesus chose him, and Rome is the center, and the pope is the head of the church. So there's a lot of politics there too. See this beautiful light coming from the wall, and then Matthew writing the gospel, and then the martyrdom. Now, the obelisks, I promised there would be more obelisks. There are more than this, but the ones that point the route to the pilgrims are altogether 5. So this is the second one if you're coming from the north. This is the top of the Spanish Steps. You see on the street here to the right, Gucci, to the left, Prada, you know, all the designers who respect themselves. They're here in Via Condotti, but we're here because of the obelisk. I went there this was about months ago, only in the springtime when the azaleas are flourishing, blossoming, then they put them on the steps. It's beautiful, but it's just that month of the year. And at the top is the Church of the Holy Trinity, and an obelisk that, if you climbed up, you pay a little visit to the church, and then you turn to the right and look across the 3 hills out of the 7 historical hills of Rome. There's the obelisk you see at the far end. This is where we are starting from. This is top of the Spanish Steps. And then this is where you arrive, the obelisk marking the Basilica of Saint Mary Major. There it is. This is behind the Basilica. And this is inside, striking with ancient Roman columns from the 1st century, probably a temple to Juno or Hera in the Greek tradition. But we are in Rome, and this is where we saw Pius IX praying to a manger, a crib of Jesus Christ, a piece of it inside a beautiful reliquary that goes back to the 1700s. But you see that the piece of wood, according to the tradition, is the manger of Jesus. And in the same church, there is this altar with an icon of Blessed Mother. It's one of those, they call them miraculous icons, that would have been painted according to the tradition by Saint Luke, the evangelist, probably dating sometime between the 5th and the 13th century. But these were always believed to have miraculous powers, especially for the healing. A lot of people were coming to Rome or other places, the altars, to pray for their own healing or somebody who they loved, somebody close to them. Now, again, Porta Santa, the Holy Door, because we are in Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the 4 papal basilicas. And now the biggest obelisk from the 15th century BC, the oldest and the biggest in Rome, and it marks the cathedral. St. John in Lateran. We are behind the cathedral here. There is a straight street connecting the 2 churches. This orange building is the so-called Lateran Palace. This is where the popes lived, but this is the location where they lived. And then this was rebuilt in the 1500s when the popes already lived in the Vatican. Its offices and the museum. Today, this is the entrance to the Cathedral of St. John in Lateran. And inside, you have a mixture of a little bit of everything in the Middle Ages and the Baroque, but the pilgrims would come especially because here in the Gothic ciborium above the main altar, there are the relics of the heads of Peter and Paul. Now, don't ask me, so the heads are here and the legs are there and the head, there are stories from the Middle Ages. There was time also in the early Christianity when the bodies of Peter and Paul were allegedly kept for a while in the Catacombs of Saint Sebastian to protect them from the persecutions, because the persecutors, ancient Romans, would have destroyed the relics likely. So where did all that end up and how it went back to where it was? That was 2000 years ago. So anyway, according to the tradition, these are the skulls of Peter and Paul in the Cathedral of Rome. And this is one of the altars where we see the Baroque frame, but inside there's this fresco from the 1300s showing Bonifacius VIII, the Pope, who indicted the first Jubilee. The biggest Jubilee, as you may imagine, was the year 2000. That was completely crazy. How many millions of people came to Rome. And the relics are not always ancient. For example, this icon is very much venerated, especially by the people from Poland, because this is La Signora della Cekostova. It was placed here by John Paul II, who was from Poland, and it is a sort of a replica. It represents the Our Lady of Cekostova. So the pilgrims who would come to Rome from Poland, many of them would come to say a prayer at St. John in Lateran as well. That also has the Holy Door. But we must not forget St. Peter ever. He's one of the 12 apostles, the first Pope. And I'm back to Peter because I wanted to show you the church just briefly of St. Peter in chains, because there are the relics there, important. Most of the people come because of the statue of Moses by Michelangelo, but we will talk about that on some other occasion. Gorgeous Moses looks a lot like Charlton Heston or vice versa. And under the main altar in the crypt, typical for the churches that had relics, are the so-called chains of St. Peter, who was imprisoned twice in Jerusalem, in Rome. And when the chains from two prisons were put together on an occasion, they merged, a miracle happened. So they are kept in this relic under the main altar, but not just that. The sarcophagus containing the relics of the 7 Maccabee brothers. They are from the Old Testament. They're Jewish brothers who refused to give up their faith. They were forced to worship the Greek gods, and all of them died for their faith. And in the Catholic Church, they are the patron saints of something that's obsolete today, but it did make sense some hundreds of years ago. They're the patron saints of the Militant Church. And they are here in St. Peter in chains. Now, across the street from the cathedral is this little shrine here. So this was the dining room of the medieval palazzo of the popes. But here in this building are the so-called holy stairs. Now, Saint Helen, the mother of Emperor Constantine, according to the tradition, brought the steps from Jerusalem that Jesus climbed on the way to see Pilate. And they're marble in this wooden casing inside, so you have to climb if you want to climb the stairs, you have to do that on your knees, and it hurts a lot. I did it twice, and it really hurts. But once you start, you can't go back on your feet. That's what you do. And on the side, there are the steps that you can take. You don't have to go up to the top on your knees, obviously. Whoever wants to, for penance, for prayer. And at the top of the stairs, there is a enchanting chapel. Behind these bars, there is another icon painted according to the tradition by Saint Luke. And it's absolutely amazing work of art and religion, history, art, faith. It's all intrinsically combined, and extraordinary ceiling as well, medieval, but I like so much this medieval mosaic with the face of Christ. It's huge, it's so overwhelming. And on the walls, there are the stories of the saints. We will get back to St. Lawrence, because here he is, poor thing. He was grilled alive. And there's this apocryph legend that says, well, when Romans put him on the grill, after a while he said, well, I'm done on this side, turn me over, they say. It's one of the stories about the lives of the saints. Again, we'll get back to St. Lawrence. It's a very important saint in Rome, and this relic is on the wall. It contains a piece of wood, and that would be the bench on which Jesus sat during the Last Supper. The table of the Last Supper, a part of it is, again, I will stop saying this according to the tradition, because that becomes boring and repetitive. So anyway, is it not? Again, I'm not going into that. But anyway, the the table is kept in the piece of it is kept in the Cathedral of St. John in Lateran. And I'll tell you something that you may or may not know. It's a kind of a tricky thing to say, but we know each other quite well. So I believe I can say things. Anyway, one of the most important relic that was kept at the Sancta Sanctorum, the holiest of the shrines, which this was the foreskin of Jesus. The only part of the body of Jesus that remains on this earth because he resurrected. Now, of course, this is not the only place that claimed to have the foreskin of Jesus. There were other shrines and sanctuaries in Europe that claimed to have it. It's not there anymore. It's not, one of those things that kind of get lost in the history. But that was extremely attractive to the pilgrims because you're praying to the only part of Jesus that's still on this earth. And some of the reliquaries were like the containers for the relics, are kept at the Vatican Museums. As you leave the Sistine Chapel, go back to the entrance, you pass by this showcase from the Sancta Sanctorum. Now, the Holy Cross of Jerusalem, this is from the tram. So, oops, look at that, an amazing, amazing church. Inside, there are those relics that I mentioned, the Holy Cross, and Saint Helen brought the pieces of the Holy Cross from Jerusalem, the nails from the crucifixion, the thorns from the crown, and it's depicted in the apse. You see here, for example, here is the detail, Saint Helen holding the cross, and in a chapel on the side, which is modern architecture, there are the Stations of the Cross, which would be the part of the penance one has to do if you want to obtain the absolution of your sins. Again, the temporary or the temporal punishment in the purgatory. But there's a whole process. It's not like, hello, good morning, may I get the absolution? You have to go through confession, certain prayers, depending on what the priest decides you have to do. And frequently you have to do the Stations of the Cross as well. And here is the showcase with the relics, the piece of the true cross, the nails, the thorns from the crown. So it's the quiet place for prayer. And there is a replica of the Holy Shroud. The original is kept in the cathedral in Turin, and it's not exposed all the time. It was exposed for the Jubilee year, 2000, and you had to make a reservation. You had to stand in line. They would let 10 people see it. What is the Holy Shroud? It is the shroud in which the body of Jesus was wrapped during the 3 days in the tomb, and then he resurrected, and the imprint of his body remained on the shroud. So if you get closer, you can see some points. It was damaged in a fire in Turin, but again, this is a replica. The original is in the Cathedral of Torino or Turin. Now, St. Paul outside the walls, huge basilica, that was burned severely in 1823, and it was rebuilt. So this is late 1800s, early 1900s, and a lot was rebuilt in the medieval style. The cough away from the microphone. And the church is really, really enormous. There are the portraits of the popes on the side above the arches. And there are some ancient parts from the Middle Ages. This is, for example, the Easter candle from the 13th century. And don't forget that the Pope, during the Mass for Easter and Christmas, he also gives the absolution of the sins. So there are different levels of absolutions, and on some certain occasions it's easier to get them than others. It's an amazing piece of art, so I'd just like to show it to you from close by. Again, 13th century, but people are here because under the ciborium, under the main altar in the crypt, there is a tomb of Paul. And there is also a so-called miraculous cross that people would pray to, also a medieval piece of art, and a statue of Saint Paul. I didn't want to take pictures of the people praying down there, didn't seem appropriate, but the statue is there, and you see it kind of chopped off, because the pilgrims would chop off a little piece to take it home with them. And for example, in the Catacombs of Saint Priscilla, there's a beautiful hole, and then the chapel where the bodies of the martyrs were, and people would not be allowed to touch stuff, because you know how we are. We don't take a piece of everything, at least a little thread to take home to the grandma. And they would let people like lower their scarves or rugs down through that hole to touch that body. So through the contact, it would become like a relic, and they would take it home. But this poor statue was severely chopped off by the pilgrims. So in the Basilica of St. Paul, you can say a prayer to the Pope in charge, or any other Pope. This is Francis, now here he is. And you know how Francis ends up his blessing on Sunday every time he says, well, and just enjoy your lunch, and don't forget to pray for me. So there we go. You can say a prayer for Pope Francis. Now, again, the Holy Door, that's only open during the Jubilee years. It's a final purification. It could be a modern piece of art, but the tradition is ancient. And I just wanted to show you the mosaic. Probably saw it if you saw the presentation on the churches, but it's really striking. And he was a little pope who feels very humble at the feet of Jesus, Honorius III. You may run into these liturgies, happening processions. You go around the churches, and then there's some event, and you feel enveloped in that atmosphere. It's special. And very close to St. Paul, there is a church called Trefontane, Three Fountains, where, according to the tradition, when Paul was beheaded, his head bounced off 3 times, and the 3 fountains came out. And he was buried there, and then his body was transferred to St. Paul outside the walls. But this church of the 3 fountains was also on the pilgrim's route since the Middle Ages. This is a lovely little remain of a fresco from the times of Charlemagne. So we're in the 8th, 9th century here. But these big Byzantine eyes, you need the Byzantine icons. There is a whole philosophy about that, about how the icons get these big eyes, because they're actually introducing you into another dimension. That's why they don't have, movement or 3D, because that's not the point. The point is that they are transferring you into another dimension. And this is another lovely little map. I wanted to show you this little church of Saint Vitus here by an ancient Roman arch. Here are the frescoes of different martyrs. For example, this is Saint Vitus. You may be familiar with the Saint Vitus dance. And he's the patron saint for the people who suffer from epilepsy. And here is Santa Margherita, Saint Margaret. Here is Saint Sebastian. He's a martyr who's also the patron saint of athletes, and he's the patron saint of the soldiers as well. And he was chosen to be the patron saint of the gay community, LGBT community. Sometimes I mix up the abbreviations, but anyway, the gay community chose Saint Sebastian as their patron saint, and he's a very important saint in the Catholic Church, especially in Rome. He died in Rome during the persecutions of Emperor Diocletian. In that same church, there is this fun ancient Roman tomb that became like an altar that people would touch, and it's supposed to protect you in case you were bitten by a rabid dog. Somehow, the traditions happen. And on one of the churches that's under the restoration now, so I couldn't take a picture of the actual plaque. It explains how if you go to this church, then you get like you see here, like 1,000 years of indulgence. So you could get that off either of your time in the purgatory or somebody else's. That's a good deal. Now, here is St. Lawrence outside the walls in a more modern neighborhood, but the church is still partly medieval. I'm saying partly because it was badly damaged during the bombing of the Allies in the Second World War, but they restored it really, really well. So this is the portico, also with some ancient Roman sarcophagi inside, ancient Roman columns, and the floor, in the medieval style. St. Lawrence is well buried, but his relics are in this church. San Lorenzo is a typically medieval pulpit, and then the altar, a mixture of medieval and a little bit of 1920s, the 1950s after the Second World War. And here is the grill, the symbol of Saint Lawrence. There are the saints to pray to. There's again Saint Lawrence with his grill. There's John Paul II, very popular, always candles lit for him, and ubiquitous Padre Pio, Father Pius. Well, he was made a saint by John Paul II, very controversial personality. He died some 40, 50 years ago, and depends who you ask. The Pope at that time really thought he was an imposter, John the 23rd, and he is the biggest miracle maker in Italy. If you have a chance to talk to somebody from Italy, especially if it's a slightly older person, let's say, just mention Father Pius and just wait. Oh, the grandmother, the aunt, the grandfather, and then this happened, and then they said a prayer to Padre Pio, and the miracle happened, and they will say everybody will have a story about how Father Pius, Padre Pio saved themselves or somebody from the family. So maybe about 30% of Italians actually practice, but about 70% statistically have a picture of Padre Pio somewhere in their wallet. Safe place. Now, just to be on the safe side. Talking about the relics, Saint Ignatius, we did talk about Saint Ignatius. I'm not going to go that much into sealing and all that, but the relics, the bones of the saints, mainly could be anything that was touched by a saint, but it's usually the bones. And people who believe that their prayer was fulfilled because they prayed to those saints, then they give little ex voto gifts, usually these hearts. This is an old tradition. There is only one place you can find these hearts these days, in Naples. There is a little filigree shop, silver shop, where you can still buy them. Now let's go to the ancient Appian Road, historical road where those poor Spartacus soldiers were crucified. Remember the movie about Spartacus with, help me, Kirk Douglas, who just died. And there's so many catacombs and churches, but I wanted to show you this little one called Quo Vadis. There was also a movie, remember, Quo Vadis, Where Are You Going? The story goes, Peter got, well, a bit scared by the persecutions, and he was trying to run away from Rome, and he was along the ancient Appian Road, and then he has a vision of Jesus going to Rome. And he asks him, Domine, quo vadis? My Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replies, well, I'm going to Rome to be crucified again. Peter got the message, turned around, went back to Rome, and was crucified himself. So that's why when he was told, he denied Christ 3 times. And that's when he was told he would be crucified like his Lord. He said, I'm not worthy, at least turn me upside down. This is inside that little church. On the floor, there's this relic, which is actually a replica. We'll see the original one in Saint Sebastian. We see the feet. You see like little feet here. These would have been the imprints that Jesus left on this block of marble as he met Saint Peter. And here is, well, always Peter with the keys, so you can recognize him easily. And here to the right, this is a modern work of art with his feet and the cross, and ubiquitous Father Pius, just for the good measure. Now there are a lot of catacombs where at that time a lot of Christians were buried there. The community was providing burial for people who did not have means for that. And some were very rich, so they would give their land to the Christians. It was a very mixed community with all different social layers. And there is a catacombs of Saint Sebastian, San Callisto. There are several catacombs on the ancient Appian Road. This is Saint Sebastian, the church where the relics of Saint Sebastian are kept. And as you enter here, you see the inscription Indulgencia plenaria quotidiana perpetua. So this is a plenary, so all absorbing indulgence, forgiveness. Quotidiana means every day. It doesn't have to be the Jubilee, it doesn't have to be a special occasion, but you have to come with a clear heart with after having confessed and done prayers and here and there some penance or good works. And it's perpetua, it's all the time, perpetual. Inside it's stunning ceiling, beautiful church with this carving that bears the coat of arms of the Cardinal Scipione Borghese. We talked about him with the Gallery Borghese presentation. And the relics, it's not just the Quo Vadis feet, but also many other important relics kept behind this little called net. These are the original feet. Traditionally, the Romans would prepare these as like ex voto to leave them at the temples when they were going on long journeys. So they recall that kind of ex voto even at the time of the ancient Roman Empire in a different context. Now there is some lovely statue of Saint Sebastian that looks very much like Bernini, but it's not. It's the same period. It's Giorgetti. There he is with his arrows. They're the instrument of his martyrdom, but he didn't die of these arrows. He was cured by another Saint Irene, and then the Romans either beheaded him or beaten him to death after that. So, however, he died for his faith. We do have a Bernini here in Saint Sebastian that was found recently, actually, some 20 years ago. The Savior. Now, this is a little church of Santa Pudenziana where they say Peter lived for 7 years. It was underneath 9 meters below. So how many feet would that be? Times 3. And there are the remains of ancient Roman dwelling that was the dwelling of the senator called Pudente. And he may have had 2 daughters, Pudenziana Prassede. This would be Pudenziana. And this is a place where it's on all the pilgrim routes. It has the stunning mosaics from the 5th century. And next little block of buildings, there is the sister, Prassede, Santa Prassede, with mosaics from the 9th century. Now, for this, I actually spent 2 hours here this afternoon with a colleague who's specialized in Byzantine apocalypse. And you could really spend like the whole afternoon just sitting here, and then this little person, and then that 24-old man, they're actually this, and the number 4 and the number 7. So there's a lot there. But these little 2 churches were on Pilgrim's route. This one especially because, again, behind these bars, you see how people lit the candles for prayer. There is, remember the column of the flagellation? There are actually 3. There is one in Jerusalem, one in Istanbul, Constantinople, and one here in Rome. And which one? They say that, okay, it's not a high column to be with the hands tied behind it, but sometimes they would tie the hands below so that the back was exposed. So depending on how you tied the arms, then the length of the column would vary. Anyway, it's a relic. And Santa Maria in Trastevere, so the neighborhood across the river, where they say a miracle happened before the birth of Christ. So in the 1st century BC, some kind of oil came out of the rock, and it was taken as a sign that it's announcing the arrival of Messiah. And it's a functioning church with weddings, where in one of the chapels, there is a beautiful representation of the Council of Trent. You see the Jesuit robes there. This is the birth of the Jesuit order. They carried the Counter-Reformation. And at the bottom to the right, there's a woman with the papal tiara. So she is the church. She's symbolizes the church, and she's pressing with her feet this pagan statue that fell and out of the, here in the corner, you can see like little beasts and pagan little dragons running away, and the church is triumphant. So this is very, very Baroque, very late 1500s, and on the way to Baroque, and also an ancient icon from the 6th century that on the day of Santa Maria in Trastevere, when they celebrate in July, the mechanism makes it come out, and all the pilgrims come to pray. In this church, there are the remains of a local saint, Santa Francesca Romana, and she's the patron saint of the motorcycle riders. And on the day of the blessing, they have a special permit, because you can't enter with the scooter, with the motorcycle in Trastevere. They all come. It's completely crazy. I mean, the whole neighborhood is like vroom, 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 vroom. They all come for the blessing. So they keep these lovely, lovely traditions. If you lost something, the keys, the cell phone, oh, please, Saint Anthony. There are the petitions. Dear Saint Anthony, he's in charge of the lost things. I'm sure you've known that. And you can all just lit a candle and say a prayer for whomever you would like. Now, we are very close to the end. I know there's a lot for a pilgrim to do, but if you're a musician, there is a church of Santa Chucilia. She's the patron saint of musicians, and this is a beautiful statue of her body. She was also a Roman martyr, and this is a marble statue that represents her body as it was found in the 1600s. They say it was preserved. When the bodies do not decompose, that's a sure sign of sanctity. Now, Santa Sabina, another church where you would like to go to see the first known representation of cross in the Christian art. On that door, 5th century. In the catacombs, you don't see the cross, because it wasn't there in the early iconography. The crucifixion was for the worst criminals. So it wasn't associated with salvation as it became later when it sank in. So it took some time, of course, St. Helen bringing the cross from Jerusalem, and then slowly the cross found its way into the iconography, and there it is. But you see where it is here at the top of this panel, the first known representation of cross in art and religion as well. Inside, ancient Roman columns. This church is the seat of behind the church, there is a whole headquarters of the Dominican church order. There he is, Saint Dominic, who lived in Rome, but he didn't die in Rome. His tomb is in Bologna. But they say he had time to plant a tree. So if you see in the portico, you see this hole, and then the popes paid homage to it, Pope Paul VI and John the 23rd. If you look through that hole, there's an orange tree planted by Saint Dominic in the 13th century. Okay, let's say that this may be like the 10th of the orange trees, but anyway, it's there. It's a lovely tradition to take a look through that hole, and you see the tree, and there's a tomb that looks like it's Saint Dominic, but no, it's a Dominican abbot. But it's on the floor where people were buried in the churches, close to the altar and the relics. Now, if you came to Rome through the Termini railway station, John Paul II would greet you. This is a very modern, recent statue that received a lot of criticism, and then it was sort of modified to look better. I'm not sure if it looks better, but anyway, it's an embrace of John Paul II, who's had very large following, and the relics and the pilgrims' routes are not only linked with the past and the old things. For example, it was John Paul II initiative to build the so-called Millennia Church. Richard Mayer, the American architect, designed it for the Jubilee year of the year 2000. And it's the part of the idea of reviving the life of the community in the suburbs. You see, this is a lovely picture taken on a sunny day, but if you go there, it's not a bad neighborhood, but it's not, you see, you know, when it's a cloudy day, these apartment buildings, there's probably not much exciting stuff going on there. So, or if it's happening, it's somewhere far away. So this church is really a reference point for the community of that neighborhood. It's not really the place where you go for relics, but it is a Jubilee church. And if people love modern architecture, that would be the reason to go. It's really, really interesting and well done. So hopefully you will come to Rome, if not as a pilgrim, as a tourist, and you may still find, even if you're not a pilgrim, you're not Catholic, you still may find some of these things, I hope interesting and informative. When in Rome, you can't really avoid most of these things. And there we go, when in Rome.